Welcome back to my 2025 NFL Power Rankings. Today we're talking about the New York Giants. Kind of a tough evaluation here, if I'm being honest, because I'm not going to lie, I look at this roster and I feel a lot more optimistic than I probably should. And then I remember Brian Dable and Joe Shane and everything about this culture and locker room and the coaching staff. And I'm reminded who's playing quarterback. They have three options, and if I'm being entirely honest, none of the three seem overly, what's the word, exciting? I mean, they're fun, but are they exciting? Do they give you optimism? Not in my personal opinion. Russell Wilson in the year 2025, that name doesn't excite me. Once again, it's fun. Jameis Winston, he comes in, throws the ball all over the place. He's fun, but he's reckless. And while he might have one 300-yard performance at some point this season, that doesn't mean he's good, right? We saw it last year. He wasn't good. He just had a good game or two throughout the season. And he'll be exciting. And Russell Wilson might be a little bit exciting. Jackson Dart might even look kind of exciting. But I'm not a big Dart guy. I'm not a big Jameis Winston guy. And I'm not a big Russell Wilson guy. All of them have very clear flaws, and all of them have kind of a one-dimensional play style. Russell Wilson is all about the deep ball, outside the numbers. He does not look over the middle. In a Brian Dable, Mike Kafka offense, does that really work? Do we think that'll work? I don't think that'll work. Then Jameis Winston looks at one read and stares it down. Whether it's open or not, he's going to throw it. He's going to throw it. And at times, that might lead to Malik Neighbors making a great play. But more often than not, it's not going to look too good. Jackson Dart, he should be the exciting name here because they drafted him in round one, but I'm not a big Jackson Dart guy. A big reason why is because he played in a very unpro-like offense. It was a one-read offensive system. He would look at one thing pre-snap and just stare that one read down. He can move pretty well, but he doesn't have these great physical tools, right? He doesn't have a very strong arm. He's not overly accurate. His mechanics are awful, which is part of the reason he's so inaccurate. He's just not a name I could be too optimistic about. Unless Brian Dable goes back to doing what he was doing in 2022, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think we're going to see that same Mike Kafka offense that is all about the RPO and one read and staring it down and just chucking it that way. One read and run. That's what we saw Daniel Jones do in 2022. And in all fairness, they had a decent amount of success until they didn't. And that's the issue with that type of offensive system. Running something that one-dimensional might work for a year, but you're not going to have continued success being so one-dimensional, revolving your entire attack off of the RPO. Now, do they have a personnel grouping that makes you say it could work a little bit well? Yeah, I just said it. Jackson Dart runs pretty well. Russell Wilson still has some wheels. Jameis, I think, is an underrated mover. They have some receivers that can make plays after the catch. Malik Neighbors, of course. Wan'Dale Robinson is a very nice after-catch playmaker. And then at running back, Tyrone Tracy and Cam Skattebo, I think that is a dynamic duo of running backs. You have Skattebo as that thunder power runner, and then Tracy is going to be that lightning quick, elusive guy. The offensive line is a unit I really like if they could stay healthy. That's the concern. They didn't stay healthy last year, and the offensive line really fell apart as those guys went down. But if Andrew Thomas could stay healthy, he's still one of the NFL's best tackles. Jermaine Illuminor is very underrated. John Runyon quietly had a great season last year. But the combination of these parts in that type of system, once again, I think it's a very one-dimensional way to play. I don't think it can have continued success at the NFL level. And like I said earlier, my issue isn't necessarily with the personnel on this team. I like the players. I just don't like the ability of this coaching staff to really mesh it all together. And that carries over to the defensive side of the ball. In theory, this should be, if not the best defensive line, one of the best defensive lines in the entire sport. Abdul Carter was such a great prospect in a lot of ways. Brian Burns had a quietly really good season on the stat sheet in terms of pressure rate and all of those advanced efficiency analytics. Kayvon Thibodeau can make some really nice plays. The best thing about having those three guys together is that you're able to rotate them because Thibodeau might not be overly consistent and he might have some low lows. Same thing could kind of be said about Abdul Carter at Penn State. His highlights are all the way up there, but there's some low lows in there. And then Brian Burns, there's a play or two where you see him really get washed. Okay? But when you're just getting the best out of those guys, and that's what you're going to see when they're in a three-man rotation like this, some really good things are going to happen. And then on the interior, Dexter Lawrence is one of the best defensive players in the entire sport right now. I mean, he's ridiculous. His ability to shut down the run, a true force of nature, can't be moved against the run, and is such a dominant bull rusher that he's always a threat against the pass. And then you have a nice rotation of guys, including Darius Alexander, who I absolutely adore. I think he's going to prove he shouldn't be rotating off the field much, and he should be their main option as that complementary interior guy. He's a young player that I really, really like. And then behind him, I kind of like that linebacker duo. The corner room, in theory, should be good. Deonte Banks had a good rookie year, although the sophomore year he slumped. I'm going to get into that really soon. Drew Phillips looked great in his rookie year. And then Paulson Adebo, who they just paid, has had some really nice seasons. The safety room, Tyler Nubin, looked all right for a rookie last year. And then Javon Holland is a great player that you could do a lot of different stuff with, very versatile athlete. But the problem is Shane Bowen, I don't really think the system does many of those guys in the secondary a favor. I don't think he knows how to use a Javon Holland. I don't think he knows how to use such a versatile player. He's never had a weapon like him, and maybe we see something new here, but he's not someone that's really known to recreate himself. Deonte Banks, we talked about how good he was his rookie year. Sophomore year, he really had a slump. I think the reason for that was the defensive coordinator change. As a rookie, he was playing a lot more tight man coverage. That is what he did at Maryland. And then in his second year, he runs a completely different defense, plays a lot more spot drop zone, and it just doesn't look right. He doesn't do a very good job at that. That's part of the reason he had such a piss-poor season last year. And then Drew Phillips did a good job. We give him his credit. But Paulson Adebo, the guy they just signed, he's more of a tight man coverage guy. So I'm hoping Shane Bowen switches up the scheme, but he's a very stubborn guy. I don't think he's going to go ahead and do that. I really like this defensive line. I think this defense has a high ceiling, but I don't trust Bowen. The same way that I don't trust Kafka to make a great offense with some of the pieces he has on that side of the ball. Now, I think the defense is really loaded and well-rounded with talent. Offensively, they're not great in the receiver room. I think they're very weak at quarterback, but they do have an offensive line I think you could build around, and I think they have a very nice duo of running backs. So you might be able to make a solid team out of this, but it comes down to the coaching staff. The difficult thing for them is that they have such a tough schedule, and I want to look at that and see where they end up this season. So let's jump right into it. The Giants have the most difficult schedule in the league. Okay, I just want to make that very, very clear. So that 5-12 record isn't the worst thing on earth. Because, again, we're going to go through the schedule, and it's going to be made very clear just how difficult of a road the Giants have ahead of them. That being said, with Joe Shane's job on the line, Brian Daboll's job on the line, you would like to see a better season put together than that. I wouldn't be surprised if we see maybe a midseason firing for Daboll and Shane. That wouldn't shock me. But let's start with this schedule. First week, you're playing against a team that made it to the NFC Championship. Yikes. That is worrying. You do not want to be facing off against that in week one. That's definitely going to be a loss just because Washington is this team that has high hopes for this year. They have a very clear answer at quarterback. Right now, Russell Wilson will probably still be playing. And then week two, they're going to lose again. The Cowboys might not have a great head coach. I'm not a big Schottenheimer guy, but we know George Pickens is going to do his thing. We know CeeDee Lamb is going to do his thing. We know Dak Prescott is going to do his thing. They're going to run the scoreboard up. I think around now we see Russell Wilson get benched for Jameis Winston. And in week three, I don't think that would translate to success because Jameis Winston is an overly good quarterback. Now, he might have a very nice performance maybe towards the end of that Cowboys game, assuming they put him in, I don't know, late third quarter. But then the next week against the Chiefs, I think the Chiefs are going to win. Now, maybe they get an upset because of Jameis Winston. I guess if he wants to have one of his good days, maybe. But I'm going to take the Chiefs there. Then in week 4, they're going to be sticking with Jameis Winston because I think maybe he gives them a little bit of a fighting chance against KC because he's going to have maybe 2 picks, but also have 2 touchdowns in that game. That's kind of how I'm predicting it to go. It's weird because with this team, I have to try and predict how the quarterback situation is going to play out, and there's a million different ways that could go. But I think Jameis Winston will have one of his good games against the Chargers. And then I think the next week, the Giants will win with Jameis Winston. We'll have a little bit of a 3-week run of like Jameis mania, right? But then week 7, it's going to look really bad. Jameis Winston against that defense, yeah, it's an incredible unit. I mean, that win against the Eagles is going to be their high. That is going to be their big high, and that's just going to be a big upset where the Eagles kind of just get caught off guard. But then they're kind of going to be sent back to earth in these 2 games right here. Now, they're thinking about putting Jackson Dart in, but as someone that's not a big Jackson Dart guy, I think that maybe they put Russell Wilson back in. That's what I'm expecting right here. Because I think throwing him in against San Fran is kind of just throwing him to the wolves. Like, I don't think that's fair to the rookie who, like I said, I don't think he's going to impress much in practice. I'm not a big fan of him. But at some point, ideally after a 4-game losing streak, you're going to say, you know what, we need him to save us. We're going to throw the rookie out here during this bye week or somewhere maybe around week 12, week 11. We're going to throw him in there, and we're just going to hope he can kind of save our job. And they're going to continue to lose because I don't think Jackson Dart is overly good. We look at Green Bay and Detroit. They're just way more talented teams, and I think Mike Vrabel is going to hold strong against a rookie quarterback that I think is far from pro-ready. This one-read offense, I don't think it's going to really work. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Daboll get fired somewhere from week 13 to week 15. Maybe we want to give him the coach interim kind of boost. That tends to happen. First game with the interim head coach. Teams normally tend to win. Maybe we entertain that. So maybe there's an upset against Washington. Maybe there's an upset against the Vikings. I'm going to say they get their big upset in week 17. I think week 11 and on, they're really just dead in the water. I think everyone kind of gave up at that point. They had their little run from week 4 to 6. Where they got the upset over the Eagles, mainly on the back of Jameis. I expect this to really be Jameis mania right there. But then, I can't expect them to beat Denver. Like, Denver's defense is way too good. I think that's going to send them back down to earth. I think the Eagles aren't going to lose both of these games. In fact, they're lucky that I have the Giants gifting them one of these 2. I just think they're going to catch the Eagles off guard. San Fran's a really good team. They're going to give the Giants their fair share of problems. Robert Saleh is going to make sure to lock down on a offense that I think is once again going to be very one-dimensional. I just don't see how this could play out well. I tried to kind of predict how the quarterback madness is going to go, but I really think it's going to be Russell Wilson early. That's not going to work too well. They put Jameis in. He has a little bit of a run, but then after that, he's going to struggle. They might put Russell Wilson back in one time, and then when they see it fit, they're going to try and put Jackson Dart in to save Daboll's job. Daboll is at some point going to be receiving that message from John Mara saying, yeah, you're gone after this year if you don't start winning. So you better put Jackson Dart in and give us some optimism. And he's going to put Jackson Dart in. Dart isn't going to look good, and they're going to struggle for the rest of the year. That's how I expect this to play out, truly. 5-12, though. This 3-win period is going to be the highest point. I don't know if it's going to be week 4 to 6, but I think there will be like some period where James comes in and looks really, really good because that's what he tends to do. He's going to fall back down to earth after that, though. And then there's not going to be much for this Giants team to really be riding on. And I think that falls on Brian Daboll. I do. I think this team is in a really bad spot because you've been adding talent, but you've been getting worse each year. That reflects on the head coach. That reflects on the coaching staff. And I think that remains a problem for this season. And I think that problem is kind of going to be masked by the quarterback fiasco. And I think that was the point. I think that's why they brought in guys like Dart, like Russell Wilson, like Jameis Winston, so we could get distracted from how bad the coaching has been for the past couple of years. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.